I've been waiting for you.
My name is Daniel Foster, 34 years old. Until recently, I was a sales manager for a furniture company here in Portland, Oregon. The job was good enough for my wife, Emily, and me to rent an apartment overlooking the Willamette River and even save for the occasional weekend trip. But 6 months ago, the company downsized. I lost my job. And since then, everything has been sliding downhill. Emily, 31, works part-time as a cashier at a small grocery store. Her paycheck barely covers part of the groceries and utility bills. The rent, nearly $2,000 a month, had always been my responsibility. Now it hangs entirely on my shoulders, and I'm living off the last of our savings. We're 2 months behind. The landlord's notice arrived this morning, printed in bold black letters that made the threat of eviction sound almost surgical. I haven't told Emily the details yet. She just thinks I'm looking for work. In truth, each day I feel less like a husband and more like a man slowly losing his grip. Our apartment sits on the 11th floor of a luxury building. Above us, at the very top, is the penthouse belonging to Claire Whitmore, a 48-year-old widow of a prominent Portland businessman. Her name surfaces everywhere. Charity galas, art auctions, whispered conversations in the building's hallways. Claire doesn't just have money, she has presence. Whenever she appears, she owns the space. Her gaze, her posture, her smile like someone holding a secret no one else is allowed to know. That morning was cold. As I stepped out of the shared laundry room, arms full of warm clothes, I heard the steady click of high heels on tile. Claire emerged from the elevator wearing a cream silk robe, loosely tied at the waist to reveal a satin dress beneath that traced the outline of a body kept in precise shape. Her blonde hair caught the light above, the soft waves falling just so. She didn't hurry. Her steps were slow enough for me to catch the scent of her perfume, woody, with a faint sweetness that lingered a fraction too long. As she passed, her eyes swept over me from shoes to eyes. No smile, just a look that held, a little too long. A look that made my heartbeat slip out of rhythm, like someone had just read a secret I didn't know I'd given away. That afternoon, while fixing a leak under the kitchen sink, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. The message was short. Tonight, top floor. Bring the wine you usually drink. No name. No need. I knew exactly who it was. From the balcony, I glanced up. The penthouse lights were on. A lone figure stood near the railing, head tilted down as if to see whether I would look up. I stood there for a long time, the bottle growing cold in my hand. And I knew, if I stepped into that penthouse tonight, nothing would ever be the same.
The hours between the message and nightfall felt longer than any day I could remember. Emily worked the evening shift at the grocery store. She left around 6, the sound of the front door clicking shut echoing in the empty apartment. I told her I'd be out looking for work. Technically, I wasn't lying. There was an opportunity waiting for me upstairs. The bottle of wine sat on the counter. My hand rested on it more than once, the cool glass grounding me, while my mind kept drifting to the woman above. I'd only been in the penthouse once, months ago, during a brief building-wide emergency when all residents were invited to wait in the lobby. I remembered the elevator doors opening to a private landing, polished wood floors, soft golden light. I'd caught a glimpse inside her apartment, the shimmer of crystal, a grand piano, the view of Portland sprawling beneath a sky turning violet. And now I was being asked up there, alone. I showered. Not for her, I told myself, for me. My reflection in the mirror looked sharper after a shave, though my eyes still carried the weight of overdue rent notices. I dressed in my best casual shirt, dark blue, sleeves rolled halfway, and the only decent pair of trousers I had left that didn't sag from wear. The elevator ride was slower than usual, or maybe it was me, feeling every second stretch. When the doors opened, I stepped onto that same private landing. The air smelled faintly of something warm, vanilla maybe, with a trace of wine. The door was already ajar. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The space was dimly lit, pools of golden light spilling over furniture that seemed more like art than seating. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the city glittering in the distance. And there she was, Claire, standing near the piano, a glass of deep red wine in hand. She didn't greet me. She didn't need to. Her eyes traveled from the bottle I carried to my face, pausing just long enough to make me aware of every inch between us. The robe was gone. Now she wore a black dress that clung where it needed to and loosened where it teased. One shoulder bare, the other draped in silk, the kind of dress that made you think about what was underneath, whether you wanted to or not. I set the bottle on the counter. She moved closer, slow and deliberate, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. And when she stopped, close enough for the scent of her perfume to curl around me, I realized something. Claire Whitmore was not the type to invite someone upstairs without knowing exactly what she wanted from them. And maybe I wasn't the type to refuse.
The door closed behind me, not locked, but sealed enough to shut the world out. In here, everything slowed. The tick of a wall clock, the ripple of wine in a glass, even the steady beat of my own heart. Claire set her glass down on the piano. Her hand drifted across the glossy lid, long fingers tipped in deep crimson. I realized none of this was accidental. Every movement she made carried a rhythm, as though she controlled the room itself. She didn't ask why I'd come. She didn't thank me for the wine. She just stood closer, close enough for the golden light to spill over her bare shoulder, making her pale skin glow as if lit from within. My throat tightened, not from the wine, but from the deliberate silence she wrapped around us. She moved toward the small bar. The dress clung as she walked, her hips tracing a line through the light. I followed, without needing an invitation. When she uncorked the bottle, the soft pop of the cork was clear, almost like a signal. Red wine poured into the glass, catching the light in a warm scarlet gleam. She handed it to me, her fingers brushing mine, a touch brief but spreading like heat across my skin. I took a sip, smooth, rich with fruit, a faint spice in the finish. But it wasn't the wine that made me lightheaded. It was her gaze, slow, certain, and weighted with intent. We sat on the long couch by the window. The city outside stretched like a carpet of light, but all I saw was her reflection in the glass. She sat angled toward me, one leg crossed, the hem of her dress sliding up to reveal a pale stretch of thigh. Not a calculated move, at least not one she needed to force, but I knew she meant for me to see. Her fingers traced lazy circles around the rim of her glass, the faint scrape of her nails against crystal, almost louder than the soft jazz humming in the background. I felt the distance between us shrink, not because I moved closer, but because she was drawing me in without laying a hand on me. When she set her glass down, her eyes lingered on me, one corner of her mouth lifting in the faintest curve. No words, but I understood. This wasn't just an invitation for wine. This was a negotiation I'd entered the moment I read her message. And I knew, if I took even half a step forward, there'd be no going back.
Claire rose first, The movement was slow, as if she was giving me time to take in every shift of fabric along her hips. The golden light caught her hair, outlining each strand in fire. She walked to the piano, letting her fingers drift over the keys, not to play a melody, but to strike scattered notes, like someone testing the tension in an already frayed wire. I stayed seated, my eyes fixed on her, not because I was trying to be polite, but because at any moment she could do something that would make it impossible for me to sit still. She turned, her gaze locking on me the way a hunter fixes on prey. She didn't close the distance. Instead, she opened a cabinet near the bar and pulled out a thick envelope. The soft rustle of paper was loud in the quiet room. She set it on the table, exactly between us. No explanation, no words. I didn't need to open it to know what was inside. Money. Enough to cover the rent. Enough to breathe for a few more months. She poured more wine, then sat again, this time closer. Only an arm's reach between us now. I held my glass, but my eyes were drawn to the hem of her dress, now slightly askew, revealing the smooth skin of her inner thigh. She knew I was looking, and she didn't adjust it. Instead, her hand rested lightly on her knee, fingers moving slowly and a silent reminder, I'm the one in control here. The wine in my glass was nearly gone. I wasn't sure if I'd drunk it or if it had simply vanished in the haze of her presence. When Claire leaned in, I heard the faint sound of silk brushing against skin. One hand rested on the back of the couch, her eyes pausing on my mouth before lifting to meet mine. Not a single word, but the message was clear. If you want that envelope, you'll have to cross the line. And I realized that line had blurred the moment I stepped through her door.
I didn't touch the envelope right away. It sat there on the table, a weight all its own, pulling every thought toward it. Claire didn't mention it either. She simply sat, wineglass in hand, eyes fixed on me. The silence stretched long enough for me to hear the faint swirl of wine against glass each time she turned her wrist. I knew exactly what that envelope meant. Rent. Survival. And the price, still unspoken, but layered deep in her gaze. She leaned forward and pulled a small wooden box from the drawer. When she opened it, a men's watch gleamed inside, the steel face catching the light. She slid it toward me, her fingers resting lightly on the edge. No explanation, but I understood. This wasn't just help. This was possession. I drained my glass, letting the warmth trail down my throat. When I set it down, her hand was already on the back of the couch, close to my shoulder. Close enough to matter. I'm not sure whether I leaned toward her first or she toward me. All I knew was that her breath was close enough for me to catch the red wine mingled with her soft perfume. Her eyes paused at my mouth before lifting to meet mine. No touch, but the boundary had already been breached. I reached out and brushed my fingers against the envelope. That touch wasn't just agreement to take the money. It was consent to something else. Something we both understood, but neither of us said aloud.
I held the envelope longer than necessary, feeling the thickness of the paper press into my skin like an invisible mark. Claire sat there, not urging me, but her gaze was enough to tell me I'd stepped into her domain. She lifted her glass toward me, a silent ritual. I poured for us both. When the bottle brushed the rim of her glass, my fingers grazed those red-painted nails, colder than I expected. Cold, but sending a current straight down my spine. She shifted her seat, no longer across from me, but beside me,
close enough for her warmth to seep through my shirt. Her dress moved, the hem brushing my thigh as she turned toward the window. The city outside was still lit, but I no longer saw it. Everything now existed within the few inches between us. Her hand rested on the back of the couch, behind me. Fingers brushed the nape of my neck, moving slowly, deliberately, each joint pressing lightly against my skin. Not rushed, but certain. I didn't turn, but I knew where her eyes were. They traced from my neck, down over my shoulder, and stopped, longer than they should have. We didn't speak. The jazz still played, soft enough to feel like it only existed to fill the spaces between the unsaid. When she pulled her hand back, leaving a narrow gap behind me, I realized I wanted it gone instantly. And I understood. This wasn't just contact. This was a test to see how I would respond. I set the envelope back on the table and turned to meet her gaze. In that moment, I knew there was no stepping back.
Claire didn't rush to act after I set the envelope down. She simply watched, as if measuring how long I would sit still. Her gaze wasn't harsh, but it carried a pressure that made me feel as though she was stripping away each layer of my thoughts. She took her glass, sipped lightly, then set it down. The soft but decisive sound of the bass meeting the table, hanging in the quiet. Then she leaned toward me, not much, but enough for her warmth to fill the narrow space between us. Her hand moved, this time not to the couch or the back of my neck, but directly onto my shoulder. The weight was measured, a marker. She was here, and I was exactly where she wanted me. Her thumb traced slowly across my collarbone, a deliberate path that raised the skin along my arms. No words were needed. She was asserting control, not through promises or threats, but through the deliberate, lingering touch that held me there. She picked up her glass again, finishing the wine before setting it aside, leaving both hands free. When she turned back, her eyes stayed on me longer, as if weighing her next move. I didn't move, partly because I didn't want to, partly because I felt that breaking her rhythm would end the game before it truly began. Finally, she leaned fully toward me, the distance shrinking to a few centimeters. Her hand slid from my shoulder down my arm, stopping just at the bend of my elbow. A gesture that seemed harmless, yet held more meaning than it appeared. Her gaze locked on mine, and I knew, from here on, I was no longer the one leading.
Claire didn't speak, but the way she shifted her body told me this was no longer a test. It was the true beginning. She rose slowly, moving toward the long couch facing the window. The golden ceiling light followed her movements, casting her shadow long across the polished wood. When she reached it, she didn't sit right away. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, a silent signal. I stood, crossing the space toward her. No words, but I knew I was answering an invitation. She sat, leaning back slightly, the hem of her dress falling open just enough for me to see the smooth skin of her knee, and higher. One hand rested on her thigh, fingers tapping lightly as if marking a beat. I sat beside her, close enough for our knees to touch. She turned toward me, eyes locked, and took my wrist, placing my hand just above her knee. Her skin was cool at first, but beneath that coolness, warmth was spreading. I didn't pull back. She didn't let go. The jazz shifted into a slower piece. The space around us seemed to shrink until only her breath and my heartbeat remained. Claire leaned in, her shoulder grazing my chest, the scent of perfume and red wine mingling, sweet and heavy. Her fingers slid from my wrist into my palm, interlacing with mine before guiding my hand higher, pressing it against warmer, softer skin. No words, but the request was clear. I would move to her rhythm.
and I knew from this moment on, I was entirely within Claire's control. My hand stayed where Claire had placed it, on that warm expanse of skin she held under her claim. She didn't let me pull away, as if every inch beneath my palm belonged entirely to her. She leaned closer. The space between her lips and my cheek was no more than a breath. The scent of red wine in her breath made my mind grow heavier, dissolving every thought of reason or consequence into smoke. Her fingers moved, slow, deliberate, from the back of my hand down to my fingers, guiding them higher. The thin fabric of her dress shifted, revealing more. The skin beneath was so smooth it made my heartbeat stumble. I could feel the warmth of her thigh seeping into my hand, pulling me deeper. Claire's eyes no longer met mine. They had dropped, lingering on my mouth. I don't know who leaned in first. All I knew was that when her lips met mine, everything else went silent. The kiss wasn't rushed, but it was firm, like a mark of possession. She drew back slightly, but not away. Her warm lips still hovered close, and her hand moved down to my abdomen, slowly, as if tracing a path I couldn't turn back from. I no longer thought about the envelope on the table or the apartment downstairs. Everything was her. The scent of her, the heat of her, the way she guided me through each breath. In that moment, I knew I belonged entirely to Claire. Not just in this room, but in the game where she wrote the rules. Claire's kiss grew more urgent, like a wave crashing over me. Her body pressed against mine, warmth radiating through every layer of fabric. I could feel her heartbeat against my chest, fast, fierce, uneven, just like my own. Her hands no longer searched. They moved with purpose, claiming every space they touched, from my shoulders, down my chest, then to the back of my neck, pulling me closer. Her scent grew headier, wrapping around me like a veil that left me seeing, breathing, and feeling only her. The hem of her dress slipped, letting her smooth skin rest against my hand. Hot, soft, irresistible. She leaned in, her breath grazing my ear, warm and faintly trembling, sending a shiver down my spine. I wrapped my arms around her waist, feeling that curve, strong yet delicate, like holding a secret I couldn't release. She responded by moving even closer, every subtle motion drawing us further into one another. No space left, no outside sounds, only the rush of breath and the constant, urgent contact, each touch pouring more fuel into the fire burning in my chest. Claire tilted her head, her lips finding my neck, leaving heat in their wake. I felt my control slipping, pulled into the gravity she commanded. I wasn't thinking about anything else. No past, no future, only this moment, and the woman leading me to the edge of something sweet and all-consuming. And I let myself fall without the slightest hesitation. I went back to Claire Whitmer's apartment on a rain-blurred afternoon. Her text was brief, as always, no formal invitation. The door was ajar, and her scent curled around me at the threshold. She placed a new envelope on the piano, thicker than the last. Before I could touch it, her red nail tapped once, an official seal. Up close, warm light spilled down her bare shoulder, over the curve of her hip, across the black silk that made me forget why I'd come. Her hand rested on my chest, keeping time with my broken pulse. She pulled me in, a kiss that didn't wait. Whatever might have been said was swallowed by heat and wine, and the faint sweetness of skin, by the quiet shift of silk. She set the rhythm, slow, then quick, soft, then biting, teaching my body a language only she could read. When the hem lifted and that smooth warmth pressed to my palm, I flared like a match. We stuck to each other as if there were no other surface in the world.
Her fingers traced electric paths across my back. Her mouth left heated marks along my neck. Tension climbed a bright line up my spine. I lost count of how many beads of sweat fell, only that by the time our breaths broke into ragged cuts, I'd lost all sense of direction. She rested her forehead to mine, smiled, and slid the envelope toward me. No words. I still heard them. Given and taken. I pocketed it like a live coal. In the elevator, my knees still loosened. The mirror flashed my flushed face and the watch she'd given me, gleaming like a confession. At home, Emily Foster was in the kitchen, sleeves wet, brown hair tied back. The clean scent of soap hit me like a soft slap. I said a few dry things, left the envelope in my coat, changed shirts, washed my face too long. When I returned, Emily handed me a notice from the landlord. I told her I had handled it. The words came easy and went down hard. I paid the back rent. The screen showed successful, a warm fraud rising like steam. Emily asked where the money came from. I mumbled about a short-term contract, a friend's referral, an advance. She nodded, her eyes catching on my watch one beat too long. I moved past, dodging the look the way you dodge a mirror. That night, I barely spoke. She told me about a kind regular at the store, a dragged-out shift, a plant that needed new soil. I stayed quiet, my head still fogged with Claire's perfume. When Emily leaned into my shoulder, a flicker of irritation rose, not at her, but at her gentleness, bright as a mirror. I shifted away. She didn't ask why. Then the pattern. Short messages, a door left open, gold light, wine, skin, envelopes. Claire pushed further with wordless requests. Guiding hands, tighter tempo, breath down to a single shared line. She liked the watch on me, liked to see the faint shadow of her mouth fade and bloom on my collarbone, liked me on time, and if I was late by a minute, she'd pull me back to the couch, rake my nape, and punish me with a kiss long enough to strip the air. Every time I left, I stumbled into the elevator like a man out of thin oxygen air. Every time I came home, I brought a layer of smoke no detergent could lift. Emily noticed. She asked less, watched more. Dinners shrank, touches thinned. I threw off clipped answers, snapped at her arithmetic with the bills. She didn't lash back, but her silence had an edge. One night, her hand rested on my wrist. Her eyes paused at the watch. I slid away, muttered about a shower. In the bathroom mirror, the watch glowed cold as a cat's eye. Another rain-dark night, Claire handed me a metal card nestled in velvet. She leaned in, voice warm enough to brush my ear. So you don't worry about small things. A new line, crossed long ago. She didn't let me think. She pinned me to the window, the city a smear of light below. Her fingers roamed, back, chest, stomach, half soothing, half demanding. I gave her what was left of me. No space, only heat and rhythm, and those relentless swells that begged to break. When the noise settled back into chopped breaths, my heart punched at its cage. She smiled, kissed me, and slid the card into my pocket like a seal. Home, late. The living room dark, a thin bar of kitchen light. Emily at the table, the budget notebook open, small piles of coins. I drifted through cold as weather. She looked up, tried to smile, asked if I wanted dinner. I shook my head. Claire's perfume still sat in my collar. Emily stalled, said nothing. She went over the electric bill, the car insurance, the broken oven. I heard and didn't. Impatience rose from a nameless place. Why do all these little things cling to me? I answered short, told her not to worry, I had it handled. She said I didn't have to carry it alone. Her voice was so steady it irritated me, like being held under a bright lamp. I smirked, shoved back my chair. She flinched. In that instant, I saw myself. A man between two homes, one warm with wood and silk, one clean with soap and plain dinners. I chose silence, but this silence weighed like lead. On the couch, I pretended to sleep. The phone buzzed. A photo from Claire. The line of a bare shoulder in gold light, a wine glass on the piano. One word, tomorrow. I stared at it for a long time. Emily turned over in the bedroom, her breathing even as rain. I lay there between two breaths, one perfumed, one clean, one pulling, one holding, and me, slipping.
Emily had been sitting at the table for a while, dinner laid out and gone cold. I came home late, as usual, without warning. She looked up when I walked in, that small, hopeful glance irritating me more than making me feel guilty. I hung up my coat, didn't meet her eyes, and asked offhand, "You've eaten?" She nodded, her voice so soft it was almost apologetic. I didn't sit down. I walked straight to the bedroom, leaving her alone at the table with the cold food. Lately, her presence felt like an old habit, faded, dull. Her stories about work, the regular customers, the little things around the house, they were just background noise, cutting into the quiet I reserved for thinking about Claire. Once, when she asked what was on my mind, I shrugged, answered flatly, "Nothing." But in truth, I was recalling the feel of Claire's lips near mine, her breath hot against my neck. Emily spoke less and less, but sometimes I caught her watching me. It looked like she was searching for something that had long gone. I avoided it because every time I saw it, I saw a woman waiting for something that would never return. One evening, while I was in the shower, my phone buzzed over and over on the table. Emily walked toward it, meaning to pick it up, but the screen lit, a message from Claire. She didn't need to open it. The name was there, bold, with a red heart beside it. She set it down, her hands trembling. When I came out, towel around my waist, she was standing in the kitchen, eyes red. She didn't ask, didn't accuse, just handed me another towel and said, "Your phone rang a few times." Her voice was steady, cold. I only nodded, walked past her to the bedroom, and didn't bother explaining. That night, I heard her crying quietly in bed. The sound was muffled into the pillow, as if she didn't want me to hear, but I did, every faint sob, and instead of pity, I felt annoyed. That sound was a weight dragging me into a place I didn't want to go. I picked up my phone, read Claire's messages again, and replied, "See you tomorrow." I knew I had stepped one more foot out of this house, and Emily, she still stayed there, holding on to the silence, not knowing it had already become the wall between us.
That night, I came home later than usual. The door was unlocked, as always. But when I stepped in, Emily was on the couch, her back straight, hands clasped tightly in her lap. The warm light above made her face look pale, her eyes red, as if she'd been crying. On the table in front of her sat my phone. I stopped at the edge of the living room. Her gaze locked onto me, not searching, not waiting, but cold, laced with exhaustion. "Do you want to explain?" Her voice didn't tremble, but each word was deliberate, as if she measured them to keep them from breaking. I glanced at the phone. The screen was black, but I knew she had read the messages. Maybe it was the photo Claire sent, or the plans for our next meeting. I sighed, tossed my coat on the chair, and sat across from her. "I don't think there's anything to explain." The words hit the space between us like a stone. Emily blinked, then gave a short, bitter laugh. "Nothing to explain? You cheat on me, Daniel, and you say there's nothing to explain?" I shrugged, keeping my tone calm. "We both know things between us have changed. You're not the same, and neither am I." She stared at me for a long moment, and in her eyes I thought I saw pity, but not for herself, for me. "No, Daniel, only you have changed. I've just been trying to hold on to something, even after you let it go." I moved to stand, but she placed an envelope on the table. Not money. Our wedding photo. The edges were worn, but the smile still belonged to two people who once believed they'd go the distance. I don't know when you became this man, but if there's anything left of the one I married, I hope he uses it to walk out that door. It was sharper than any shouted insult. I stood, didn't look back, went to the bedroom to gather a few things. When I came out, Emily was still there. No tears, no shaking, just staring at a spot in the air. As I closed the door behind me, I realized the silence that had been the wall between us had finally collapsed, but it didn't reveal a way back.
I returned to the house on a gray afternoon. No one opened the door. No footsteps from the kitchen. Only a silence so complete I could hear the click of the key in the lock. The dining table was bare. The chairs sat exactly where they had been the night I left. On the bookshelf, our wedding photo was gone, leaving a neat square of dust in its place. In the bedroom, the bed was neatly made, as if no one had slept in it for a long time. The closet door hung slightly open. The gaps between the hangers told me Emily had taken many things, but left more behind: her absence. I sat on the edge of the bed. This house had once been my safe place, the final stop after long days. Now it was just a room full of cold memories, the walls still carrying the faint scent of her soap, the scent that made it hard to breathe. Claire texted, asking me to come over. I didn't reply. Sitting in this room, I realized I didn't truly belong anywhere. Not with Claire, not with Emily, with no one. As the sun set and darkness pooled in the corners, I could almost hear the silence asking me, "What will you do now?" I didn't have an answer.